I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, please call the roll. Chairman Miller. Present. Mr. Davidson. Present. Mr. Knight. Present. Mr. Bosworth. Mr. Tusa. Present. Mr. Lee. Here. Mr. Rowe. Here. Mrs. Campbell. Present. Mr. Caldwell. Here. Mr. Thibodeau. Ms. Carroll. Present. Mr. Albert. Here. Mr. Jewell. Present. Mr. Dow. Mr. Jordan. Present. Mr. Bridgewater. Here. Mr. Hidalgo. Here. Ms. Cormier. Here. Mr. Carville. Here. Mr. Lane. Here. Representatives of Mr. You have one. Okay, thank you, Madam Secretary. I just want to let all of you know that my people be live meeting for them to play the role in the with that, I need a motion to approve the agenda. What everybody is doing, any objection? That motion passes. Second motion, that motion passes unanimously. Any public comment on the agenda? Any public comment on the agenda? Okay, approval of the minutes, motion to approve the minutes. Mr. Hidalgo, second. All in favor? Motion passes. Old business, in the middle of having nothing to discuss. Thank you, John. We're going to go ahead and move to the CPRA implementation update. CPRA executive director.
Thank you, Chair members of the board. For all new members, we do here every month just give an update on the implementation of our program, all the projects that are ongoing that have been funded through our fiscal year plan. And so excited to do that today and really go through some of the exciting projects we've got ongoing across the state. This is just a snapshot of where we are today. As you know, we presented over the last couple of months. We have roughly 110 active projects, with 43 of those in construction. And so, as you saw in our fiscal year 25 annual plan, our goal is to try to get 80 to 90% of the funds that we have in our spending plan in implementation and construction. And so, you can see that here we're really achieving that. It's really exciting. We've got 43 projects in construction across a variety of types, 18 in hurricane protection, 10 in water creation, 6 in shoreline protection, and a variety of other types of projects. And then you can see the engineering design team goes up for implementation. We've got 62 projects. So as we continue to grow that, trying to get to over 130 projects that will in the peak of FY25. To really highlight the peak of the coastal program across the state. With the 110, we obviously can't update on all those every month, so we highlight a couple, and happy to do that today. We're going to start with a couple of restoration projects inside the showcase that are either ongoing, being completed, or just getting started. With that, a couple of themes that you're going to see throughout the year on. The first is with these projects, you're going to see us building upon existing and ongoing projects. And so obviously the program was started in 91. We have the CPRA really started in 2005, and it's since '07 in our master plan, but now we've got these really large projects on the ground and we're building on those. And so the first I'd like to highlight is the Grand Chenier Park Creation Project in Blackman's Parish. And you can see the aerial view. This is a roughly $65 million project that was funded by NERDA in Restoration Plan 7. This is actually roughly over 340 acres of marsh and ridge that were built with water from the Mississippi River. And we are actively working to complete this project. And so this is really an exciting project. A lot of kudos to the trustee group for all the hard work to fund this. But we're eager to see this get completed. In addition to this, adjacent to this project is the Grand Bayou Ridge and Marsh Creation Project, which is funded through CPRA. And it's not shown here on the map, but we're kickstarting that project now. And so once both of these projects are done, you'll see over $105 million of work that's been implemented with over 600 acres of marsh and ridge built. And this protects the Blackman's Parish community, including the New Orleans to Venice levee system, adding resiliency and wave energy reduction. So not only the habitat restoration that we showcase in these projects, but also the resiliency component to the flood protection infrastructure is critical. In this, through these implementation updates, I always like to show the exciting pictures of the ongoing work in construction. And so what you're looking at here is a snapshot of the work that went on last spring to build the containment dikes. You're going to hear from our chief engineer, Rudy. He's going to talk a lot about our dredging program today. But as a lot of you know, we built containment dikes to help contain the borrowed material. You can see that snapshot of the contractor working there. And then this year we have, some projects, photos of that being completed. So you can see those marsh cells that are filled to build this 340 plus acre project. Just another snapshot of last summer of those containment dikes being constructed. And then those same cells are now filled. This project actually had 3 marsh creation cells. And so you can see these photos of this. So it's really exciting to see what was once basically open water now is real land. So it's really exciting and provides resiliency, like I said, to the NOV levee system. In addition to that, on these projects, we like to highlight the work that goes into it from our contracting partners. This is the companies that were involved in the construction phase, Weeks Marine, Whitetail Oilfield Services doing the construction, partnering with Delta Coast and Gulf Coast Air Photo, as well as Evan Graves on the inspection side. So we've got a lot of local firms that are doing great work, and it shows really the impact of the Louisiana economy. In addition to that, we wanted to highlight a shoreline protection and restoration project, and we've got a really good highlight, as I mentioned, building on existing projects. This is a really good example. This is the La Branch Shoreline Protection Project in St. Charles Parish. And so you can see here, just to get this started, this is really an extension of, and it really what's looking like a program, a variety of projects funded by a variety of sources. You can see there La Branch Shoreline Protection, East La Branch Shoreline Protection, along with Bayou La Branch Wetland and East Bayou La Branch Marsh Creation. Those are all existing projects that were funded by CAP, by corporate, and by state dollars. And really just have a couple of photos here to kind of showcase the impact that this has had. So this is a project. This is a picture of what was once the existing shoreline in 2013. And you can see that evolution as these projects have been implemented. The land that was gained along with the shoreline protection the year after in 2014. And then we can see, we've gotten questions on how do these projects perform. Well, now you can see what it looks like today with one, the performance of that shoreline protection project really looking great, as well as the marsh behind it is still intact. And so with that, you can see that from an aerial perspective. Really great habitat, as well as that shoreline protection component. And so what we're doing now is moving to the southwest here. And so the project that we are implementing now is the extension to the La Branch Shoreline Protection Project. We are going to be implementing a shoreline protection rock revetment along that shoreline, along with marsh creation on the protected side of that. And one of the things that we're also going to be doing is there are two old oil field canals that we will be closing. They were allowing wave energy from Lake Pontchartrain to actively erode that area, so we'll be plugging those as well. This is just a couple of the aerial of the project features. Obviously, we'll have access to flotation canals to get the contractor into the site. We'll have that proposed shoreline protection feature as well as the beneficial use on the protected side. And just a couple additional details on the project design. To reduce settlement, as you can see in that typical section, we'll have a lightweight aggregate core to hopefully reduce the magnitude of settlement with the cap of rock. We're obviously going to be plugging those two oil field canals, but we'll provide fish dip access for aquatic fish passage. And then obviously the dredge material that we'll be digging for the access channel will be used beneficially on the protected side. So really a great project. It showcases the ability to keep building on all the existing work that's been done over the years. This is the project schedule. We are now under construction. The bid was awarded to Crosby just recently, and construction is beginning. And we anticipate hopefully pending obviously hurricane season that we can get through construction by the winter of this year and complete that construction. This project was funded with surplus dollars from 21 and 22. So really a great use of state surplus dollars here that we'd like to showcase. In addition to that, I'd like to turn it over to Deputy Director Brent Haas. We want to, in these implementation updates, highlight really the great refuse projects that we have been working on to provide access to the public to the great coastal resources that we have across our state. So I'll turn it over to Brent.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, members of the board. So as Glenn mentioned, and for those of you that perhaps are new to the board or maybe are not familiar with the terms of the oil spill settlement, as a part of that, $60 million were set aside to mitigate for the impacts to essentially the access to our public, our citizens, to the natural resources of the state, our recreational use of those resources. And so we've been fortunate to partner as the lead trustee, CPRA being the lead trustee, to partner with a number of folks, namely a couple of agencies that sit on this board right now, the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, the Lieutenant Governor's office as well, through his Office of State Parks, to build projects on the Pascagoula Wildlife Management Area, for example, the Bonachin Wildlife Management Area, the Atchafalaya Delta Wildlife Management Area, to name properties that are managed by the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, installing docks, boat launches, pirogue launches, and things of that nature, again, to improve access to our citizens, for our citizens to the resources, but also, as I mentioned, with the Office of State Parks. And so one project that I've talked with those of you that have been on the board for a while, you've heard me talk about this in the past, is the Point State Park improvements. Our sister project to this one actually is on the Grand Isle State Park as well, and it's sort of very similar in terms of its features, although the pier at Grand Isle is being repaired as well. But you'll note a number of features that was done at Sycamore Point, including a rock revetment on Quintana Canal, some beach nourishment that you see there. Of note, I would say that the sediment from that beach nourishment came from the Atchafalaya River navigation channel. And so it was removing what's basically a negative in a navigation channel, of course, but it's also a resource to other parts of the state and use it for benefit here. There's a boardwalk that was constructed as well, a mobile comfort station, and then you can see the improved road, and notably the most recent update on the 22 pull-through RV campsites. And I've got a video that hopefully will play here that'll highlight most of these features and give you a little better sense of what they look like and how nicely, frankly, they've turned out. Those are the new campsites, of course. Comfort stations on the left. Of course, the boardwalk there, which is about almost 2,000 feet, really nice feature, allows people to get out over the marsh and sort of almost immerse themselves in the marsh. See the wildlife and the fish, of course, that are there. More information on all that can be had at our website and, of course, at the State Parks website. So, just a great project, something we're very proud of, reconnecting our citizens, of course, with the bountiful natural resources of the state. So, happy to highlight that for you. And I'm going to turn it back over to Glenn. Oh, I'm not turning it over to Glenn just yet. As Glenn mentioned, of course, a lot of local companies and folks that work in Louisiana have worked on this. About 86 jobs were created as a result of implementing this project. Those are non-government jobs, and you can see some of the firms and some of the businesses that helped us implement this project, which we couldn't do without them. We're very grateful for that. And so now I'll turn it back over to Glenn.
Thank you, Brent. And as I mentioned, that concludes the project update today. As we'll go on, we'll continue to highlight really great projects that we're constructing across the state. We wanted to showcase those as a snapshot of what's going on right now. Wanted to provide a few additional updates to the board on some of the ongoings over the last few weeks and the last month. Sorry. The first is just wanted to highlight Neil McMillan will kind of dive into this, but Neil and I and Greg Grandy had an opportunity to speak at the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association National Summit. It allowed us to really showcase the importance, one, of our coastal program in the state of Louisiana, and two, the importance of federal funding and the importance of really hopefully passing either the rise of breeze at some point to get additional offshore oil and gas and wind energy revenue sharing. And so we were able to sit on a few panels. Really thanks to the ASPPA to allow us to do that, but it also gave us a few minutes to touch base with Congress and the congressional delegation about these important bills. A couple of snapshots there, and Neil will dive into the details. In addition to that, a lot of you were able to join us for Coastal Day 2024. Special thanks to the governor for the great words and Chairman Dove that they said at the press conference. But really want to highlight just the amount of really great attendance and showcase of all the partnerships that we have, whether it's the parishes or the local levee districts, the industry, as well as our NGO partners that allowed us to put this on. It was a great day. We had attendees, as Mr. Tony Alford saw on the networking event. The entire River Center was full of people and got to connect with CPRA and other contractors. So it was really a great success, and we will continue to build on that in the future. And then as a follow-up to that, we will be working, CPRA will be working with CTAC, the Coastal Technical Assistance Center, to restart our quarterly meetings. And so this is really a great opportunity for businesses that are interested in doing work with CPRA and the coastal program to connect with us and begin that dialogue. And so this particular set of meetings will start back on May 8th and will be a quarterly running meeting. We'll be able to connect with these businesses. This particular set of meetings will be focused on the professional services side, whether it's environmental engineering or even communications related work that we do. And then we'll also be partnering with CTAC on the construction side, and we'll give you updates on that in the future. But just want to highlight that that'll be kickstarting so that we can start connecting with businesses to expand our relationships there. In addition to that, we are, as Brent often says, as the master plan is done, we start working on the next version. And so our master plan team is working hard on the 2029 version of that plan. That really kickstarts with these community conversations. And so that work has gotten started. Yesterday, the master plan team was with Blackman's Parish in Belle Chase, and from what I understand, had a really good conversation there. We will be moving today to Luling, and then you can see the other meetings extending beyond that. Brian Lazina, our chief of planning, and the master plan team are leading those, and excited to hear from the community and get great feedback, as we always do. So this is something that we really accelerated into the beginning of the plan to get feedback early as we kickstart this new master plan for 2029. And then a couple other updates. Bryn's going to tell you a little bit about the CSAP recipients this year in '24.
Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, so another announcement that we have been fortunate enough to make since 2008 are the recipients of our Coastal Science Assistantship Program. And so what this is the CPRA essentially funding applied research at many of the institutions across coastal Louisiana, even in North Louisiana, as I'll mention in a moment, to select students to, again, conduct applied research on issues facing our coast. These are issues that feed into the planning, the implementation, the construction of our projects. Again, it's applied research, and it's something that we're proud to have supported for quite a number of years. In addition to that research, of course, the students are required to perform an internship with CPRA, so we get some labor out of those grad students, which is a good thing, about 240 hours for each of those. Since its inception, we've awarded assistantships to 83 students at 9 different institutions across the coast. Those include LSU Ag Center, UL, Southeastern, Tulane, Nichols, Longcon, and Louisiana Tech. As I mentioned, we extend into North Louisiana as well, that are with individuals that are doing research along our coast. So we've received about 12,000 internship hours from these students, and it's just a good program, again, to get and support research that absolutely supports our coastal program, helps us to be better at our master planning, helps us to be better at implementing projects. And many of these students go on, of course, have gone on to work for CPRA and have gone on to work for many of the firms that support the coastal program in Louisiana and abroad as well. So, Glenn.
Thank you. And then finally, just want to highlight the upcoming dedication ceremony that we have. The CPRA team is going to be doing a coastal celebration for one of the projects we just talked about, the Branch East Marsh creation. That's going to be on May 1st at 10 a.m. It's going to take place at the Bonnie Carey Spillway Pavilion. But it's really good dedication. NRCS and CPRA will be leading that along with a tour of the project site afterwards. And then in addition to that, the next day, the CPRA task force is going to be meeting to go through their annual process on looking at the additional candidate projects for this next priority list. And so we'll be updating you on that CPRA process in the coming months. But just wanted to highlight this really important dedication for a great project and then that task force meeting. As always, you can connect with us at CPRA through social media at all of these sites and our website, and we look forward to answering any questions that the board may have. Thank you.
Any questions? Mr. Carl, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Glenn, yesterday I was at the conversations with Chase with your staff. And there were a couple of questions that the homeowners put forward that we did not know the answers to, and it deals with the diversions. As you probably know, homeowners insurance with flood is pretty high. One family was complaining that they pay around $20,000 worth of insurance per year, and they can't afford it. They're thinking about moving. And they are fearful that with these diversion projects, it might cause more flooding and therefore would then increase their insurance rates. Do you have any input as to that?
Thank you, Mr. Kyle. I don't have any input on the insurance rates, just particularly with FEMA Risk 2.0, it's difficult for CPRA and I guess others to understand kind of what goes into calculating those insurance rates themselves. I know that we're actively working with the administration and Chairman Dove through the Governor's Office of Coastal Affairs to evaluate the diversion projects, and certainly looking forward to doing that in the coming months. But as far as the insurance rates are concerned, I think even beyond the diversion itself, it's hard to really understand as FEMA has sort of, I guess, modified that calculation, how any of the projects, whether it's flood risk reduction or just really other things in general, kind of go into what those insurance rates are.
One more question, Mr. Chairman. It's very appropriate that you have that picture up there, because yesterday there were a group of Tulane students, and some of them were in the journalism department. They were there to maybe write an article on the conversations. And they were complaining that some of these social media apps that we have, the information on those apps, they're not consistent throughout. So, for example, um, a student would only use Instagram and they would not use Facebook or whatever else you have on there. And so some of the information you have on Instagram might be a little different from, let's say, Facebook or what have you. So they would ask that somehow we could have information that might be consistent throughout. That was one. And the other issue was when you tap onto some of those apps and you get pictures, they're saying that those links provide very good educational information. However, some of those pictures lack a title, and so they don't know what is actually behind those links. So they would have to probably go through all of those things just to try to figure out what information they're trying to obtain. So maybe you could revise those links a little bit, provide them with a title so that they know when they tap onto those links, what kind of information they actually get.
Yeah, appreciate you bringing that to our attention. We'll be happy to work on that. We'll get with our communications team and get that addressed. But yeah, we certainly want to do that. Certainly want the consistency and then want them to understand where the pictures are and what projects that goes with. So be happy to do that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Glenn, I just want to ask real quick, the Corps has a lot of activities going on in the upper river, specifically sediment reduction, and I think there may be some slight concerns regarding what those impacts will have on our portion of the river as it relates to restoration projects. Can you just talk really quickly or just let us know how or if that will have an impact to us, any sediment reduction activities as it relates to dredging and filling of any projects we have?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Davis. And I think broadly speaking, obviously any reduction in sediment has some impact. I think we're hopeful that in our work with the Corps, that in the lower Mississippi River comprehensive study that we'll understand what that is. I think generally there is still a significant amount of settlement that comes down the Mississippi and either stays in the Mississippi River itself or goes down the Atchafalaya Basin, as we know. So I think broadly speaking, there will always be a lot of sediment that can be used for restoration projects. But any reduction efforts will likely be part of this lower Mississippi River comprehensive study that the Corps is initiating. This CPRA and myself and Bryn and our team are actively engaged in that as the state's designee. So as that process continues, we'll be certain to update the board. But I think on a general basis, we should have enough sediment to continue to build the large scale projects that we're actively trying to conduct. So thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Leday, first off, one of the new guys, I'm honored to sit up here with all of you guys. But getting in the weeds a little bit, Mr. Leday, I wanted to compliment CPRA and your internship program. And also thank you guys for being part of the Louisiana Association of Professional Biologists seminar that we had this past year. I hope that level of involvement continues because there's a clear sort of demographic gap of we're not recruiting a bunch of kids into this field. So I really wanted to compliment you guys for your vision in putting that together. The other thing I noticed it looked like there was a difference between the CAP shoreline stabilization project and then the one with fish dips that were paid with surplus money. Would you guys foresee that moving as a more standard operating procedure for equipment projects as opposed to leaving these gaps where we've seen over time that those do become, they don't heal, I guess if that's a good term, as fast as the areas that are hard structured. And I noticed it looked like in that CF project you had a bit of an overlap where you still had a fish passage, but you were able to protect that portion of the shoreline. I was curious if you see that moving forward. I know these weren't funded with CPRA dollars, but evolving into the CPRA program.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Mr. Corville. I think that what you'll see now is finding ways to still build aquatic fish passages, but have overlaps in various designs so that, as you mentioned, we don't have shoreline erosion in between those gaps. And so we have that on some of the Rockefeller structures, and we'll work towards that as sort of standardized design. There's different ways to do it, but understand your concern.
And fantastic, and I guess to break the suspense, I'm obviously a pro rock guy.
Any other questions? With that, what I'd like to do is start with Mr. Kyle and let him in. Since we have so many new faces up here, I should have done this at the beginning. If you could maybe give a little bit about yourself and what area you represent, and we'll go around the room. So 'cause there's some new faces, and I want to make sure everyone knows who's on the board.
Joseph Gao, I represent the Pontchartrain Basin. I'm a practicing attorney, doctoral student at Tulane, and a former U.S. congressman.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Dustin Davidson, Chief of Staff for Department of Energy and Natural Resources, here representing the Secretary of the Department.
Patrick Whitty with Louisiana Economic Development, of course, representing the Secretary, proud of our work with CTAC.
Gina Campo with the Office of Community Development and Disaster Recovery Unit. I'm the designee for the Division of Administration for the Commissioner, involved in the Watershed Initiative. My agency is funding for that.
Edward Knight, Department of Transportation and Development and Public Works and Water Resources. We're the ones developing the models with OCD, and we handle floodplain management, hydraulics, hydrology, and dams and levees as well. So, pretty good time, but not for long.
Thank you.
Tony Alford, I'm chairman of the Governor's Advisory Committee, and real excited about moving forward.
Thank you. And Cost Gordon, Chairman of CPRA and past President of Terrebonne Parish.
Matthew Jules, St. Charles Parish President, representing the Barataria Basin.
Julie Burrow, Department of Ag and Forestry, Assistant Commissioner of the Office of Salt and Water Conservation. I work with the 44 statewide salt and water conservation districts and a number of different agencies, namely the NRCS, in helping get districts to deliver Farm Bill conservation programs from the coastal zone on up. And have been working for a number of years with CPRA and the CPRA's predecessors at coastal revegetation as well through those coastal zone conservation districts.
I'm Bill Hidalgo. I represent the Chaffly Basin area, and I'm the president of the St. Mary Levee District.
Dwayne Bourgeois, I'm executive director of the North Foos Levee District, and I represent the Terrebonne Basin in this on CPRA's board.
Chad Corvo, I represent Tesh Vermilion Basin, but in full disclosure, I'm a recovering Louisiana Department of Natural Resources, now CPRA employee, biologist by schooling, and I'm a private property manager, manage about 265,000 acres of coastal marsh.
John Lane, Chief of Staff and Coastal Director for St. Bernard Parish, represent the Brennan Basin.
Samantha Carroll, I'm the Executive Director of the Louisiana Seafood Nutrition and Marketing Board, and they are positioning for the Lieutenant Governor.
Robert Jordan, I'm a real estate developer and investment manager, and I'm representing Tesh Vermilion.
Corey Cormier, representing Alpha
David Caldwell with the Department of Insurance, representing Commissioner Tucker.
Brian Tusa, Surveillance Division Administration for Department of Environmental Quality, representing Secretary General.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to, so everyone will know the new faces along with the old faces up here. And with that, are you complete?
Yes, congratulations to the new board members and look forward to working with you.
Okay, and then next is the construction industry update. Scott Kirkpatrick, Coast Builders Coalition.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for giving me a few minutes. I thought it'd be helpful and good at this time to kind of come address the board for two reasons. One is at the beginning of the term and a number of new members here. I wanted to certainly make y'all, familiarize y'all with some of the things going on in the industry. Many of y'all I've worked with for a couple decades, but some of y'all have, since my time in Governor Blanken's office, but some of y'all at this meeting. So the second thing is, obviously, we've got the largest annual plan ever. And so I think some of the questions are, hey, how has the industry prepared for this? Are they ready for this, et cetera? So just kind of wanted to touch base. That's kind of what inspired this, and wanted to touch base a little bit about those things. So I'm here kind of talking on behalf of the Coast Builders Coalition. We formed in 2008. We brought the industry together to support the state and coastal efforts in Louisiana. And that idea was really born out of a discussion with Secretary Scott Angel, Department of Natural Resources at the time. And he said, look, this is exploding. This industry is really growing. Of course, that was right after Katrina. We need others to come alongside us and help us as we stand this up. And so we kind of formed this group really working with anybody in the industry, right? The engineers, the contractors, the consultants, the mitigation banks come in, help us, help the state and the locals really be successful with their coastal program, right? So our main focus is partnering and helping grow the pot, and then as there's more funding, efficiently execute, because everybody wants to. We need successful projects. We don't want there to be frustration in execution, et cetera. So that's kind of really what we're focused on. So I mentioned the industry growing in 2008, and it's kind of amazing to think that, pre-Katrina, if you looked at the combination of state funding and local funding for, coastal restoration, hurricane protection, it was around $100 million or so a year. That fluctuated a little bit. But, post-Katrina, that, exploded, 10 times growth in the industry, right? And the first initial phase of growth was obviously the more hurricane protection, the HISRIS fund. As you were on pace spending $1 to $2 billion a year doing that program. And then really, obviously, after Deepwater Horizon, we kind of moved more to kind of the coastal restoration side, where we had the Deepwater Horizon funding kind of come to bear. And so the industry has kind of not only come alongside those different areas, for a while focused on hurricane protection, then shifting more to coastal restoration. And I think, in a very successful way, been able to provide the state and the locals what they need in terms of workforce and machinery, et cetera. And a reason for this, some folks it's interesting as folks say, hey, tell me about the industry, what different firms are doing things. I think probably a benefit for Louisiana is that most of the firms involved in this work, this is an element, right, of what they do. Most of them are involved in energy work as well, right, and they make this a part of what they do. And then a lot of them also are involved in the transportation community, doing that as well. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic and helps, I think, as different markets go up and down, helps them kind of spread expertise across different projects, and it's been good. And then another question you get is, so how many people and jobs are captured in this? And I just want to compliment the CPRA for highlighting this in y'all's projects. And I think it's just fantastic when y'all see this project, you see an estimate of the jobs, you see the firms involved in that. That is very unique. We think that's wonderful and important. But that gives you a snapshot of the jobs. But of course, estimates are that there are almost 30,000 people in Louisiana that are involved in this type of work. GNO did this study a while back. Of course, they put it under the water management sector heading, which is a little broader than just coastal restoration, hurricane protection. But as y'all think about the program, of course, you have what y'all are putting out, right? You have what locals are putting out in terms of jobs in this space. And you also have what the Corps of Engineers is putting out, right? And that lately has been a very compelling list of projects that's the Corps is putting out. I know we have had discussions in the past with CPRA trying to make sure that when the Corps has a compelling list of projects and the state does, that they actually sync those appropriately so there's not too much pressure on at any one time to do certain jobs. And so I know that collaboration continues, and in some ways that's a good problem to have, right? When you've got so many profit jobs that you need. But I think the record will show that with that collaboration, the industry has kind of, stood up and achieved what they needed to. So related to that, just kind of what are some things that we've kind of successfully been engaged in with the state and locals over the years. There have been questions, as I mentioned, hey, are we going to have the workforce for this stuff? Are we going to have the dredges for this stuff? There was about a decade ago, a big study, hey, are we going to have enough dredging, et cetera? Are we going to have the equipment? And I think time and again, we have, kind of successfully had that stuff ready. But I will tell y'all, when you think about your role here, one of the really important things that has made a difference in that is the foresight and the planning y'all give to the industry on these projects, right? I mean, they look at your annual plan. They look at the three-year outlook. They look at the master plan, and they are building their business model off of that, right? Hey, do we think there's going to be enough demand for us to build a dredge, to invest tens of $millions into a dredge? Do we think there's going to be enough demand for consultants in this certain space to where we're going to go hire somebody out of school, and even if they don't have immediate work, we feel confident that they're going to be able to fill the roles. All that they're looking at what y'all put out and making decisions, business decisions about that. So hopefully they can be in a position to serve y'all and fulfill your plan. And so that I think overall, certainly. Overall, we think that's been very successful. We're continuing that and very thankful for the outlook that y'all provide on that. I mentioned the workforce. We've had some great discussions through the years. Community college, higher education institutions, just making sure that y'all have the plethora of everywhere from PhDs down to surveyors available to y'all. And so that is a great, again, a lot of success there. I think the Louisiana Workforce Commission has been involved in that at times, and again, I think that's excellent. Certainly, at times we hear there may be a little gap here or there, and we try to be responsive on how we can meet that and or get feedback to a community college or something if they say, I'm looking to start this program. Do you think you would hire people out of this, right? And so there have been some good discussions about that. Certainly, some discussions with CPRA through the years about kind of procurement practices. CPRA, in some ways, created those. Had to create those. And they certainly looked at DOTD for some of that framework, but CPRA had to think about the most efficient way they procured that. And as part of that, we would give feedback on, hey, when you do it this way, this is very helpful for us. When you don't do it this way, this makes it really challenging for us. I know as we started industry day and they give the industry briefing, a lot of times that is CPRA staff presenting the ideas on the project and getting some feedback from the industry about, hey, if you bid it this way, this makes it harder for me to anticipate what I need to do. It probably drives up your cost, right? And so trying to get that timely feedback to the staff so that they can bid these projects in the most efficient manner. And again, I mentioned the state's commitment to this annual plan and master plan being an excellent document. Kudos to y'all for that, and thank you for the commitment there to get those documents in place to provide a placemat or a planning map for the industry. And just one more thing to say, Louisiana is exporting this expertise across the nation and even across the world. That is what we wanted. That's back in the day, certainly we all felt like we had some good Cajun engineering we could share with others, but now we've got some great, you have companies sharing the projects. Hey, I've done this project. Here's a successful project in Louisiana. I can do this in your state. We've seen Gulf Coast states now have more money for coastal restoration in particular. And, we've got firms in Louisiana or with experts in Louisiana who are able to go and promote what they did in Louisiana over there to try to help them. So that's been very exciting. And then just want to kind of highlight, some industry challenges as y'all think about things. I was thinking about this. I'm gonna use the 80-20 rule because it's a little cliche. My numbers aren't exact here, but when industry looks at even with the best projections, when the industry looks at kind of the continuing CPRA budget, right? There's only 20% or so of that is kind of recurring. Like, hey, we just know, the Go Mesa program almost undoubtedly is going to be there. It's going to take obviously an act of Congress, right, to knock that out. The QuickWork program, but 80% of the funding, right, it has some temporary nature to it, whether it be surplus funds or NIFWIF funds or something like that. So as good as it is to have the plan and the projections and annual management, there is certainly some uncertainty built in that. Now that is very different, I would highlight, from the transportation industry, right? They've really got some set gas tax money at the federal and state level. The variability they can expect over the next decade or two is very small, right? And so I bring that up just because one, the industry's got to factor that into kind of their thinking, but also I think it inspires us to want to partner with y'all to keep it going, right? Because it doesn't matter how great the plans are, if you don't have the money to fund them, it doesn't matter. And so that's a real, I think, as folks, as industry visits with me about why we're engaged, why we want to help the state, why we want to go to DC and advocate for more money. It's because they see that 80% of this funding is temporary, right? And we've got to keep the pressure up, the advocacy up, and spreading the good news about what we're doing. One of the interesting things when I think about transportation projects, it's generally, it is legislators, constituents complaining often about the road, the condition of the road, or the traffic congestion, right, all across the state. For coastal projects, by and large, it's only a small portion of the state where you can have folks who are able to see the projects. And so our ability to tell a great story, project what all the good things that's going on is really necessary to get, particularly at the state level, legislators engaged in funding these things, which is really what we need. Y'all do certainly a great job on that, but we know it's important to do that. And then, certainly a challenge also, inflation. We're hitting it like everybody, and certainly trying to handle that as best we can. And workforce, we, as I mentioned, there is, although we've generally done very well, if the oil and gas field shoots up, suddenly you get pressure. Some of those workers getting more pay over there, that can put pressure on coastal. Same thing, transportation. We got certainly a lot of federal dollars coming out. So that all factors into kind of the pricing and everything we get. And finally, just last thing I'd say, the opportunities to innovate. There have been some very innovative things that have happened in this space. We know that even more needs to happen. But at times there can be that friction because either the local or state owner of the project, it can be hesitant to try the new stuff because they don't want to be responsible for something that didn't work out right. And so we think it's very important that you kind of provide safe space for people to suggest innovations, right, to pilot different things, proof of concept, and then when you do feel comfortable about it, you can grow it and expand it. So it's important to find that balance there to where you obviously don't try things that are totally unproven, but you also, things that are unproven, you give them an opportunity to prove themselves. So those are, just some of the challenges. Again, that's really just kind of all I wanted to say, just familiarize yourself with some of the things we're seeing. Certainly thrilled about what's coming out from the state. Thrilled about the leadership y'all provide here, and don't hesitate to, I know all the CPRA folks know where to find us to come and say, hey, we need industry to come and help and talk and give us information and data. We're certainly, more than happy to do that. So, any questions?
Thank you, Scott. Any questions?
Thank you, Scott. I know we had talked a couple of years ago about workforce, and Nunez Community College has a workforce program, and it's right now it's focused on GIS. But Nunez is getting very aggressive in developing a whole coastal program, which is more, they're starting to guide towards wind and so forth. The problem we're having right now with Nunez is recruitment, trying to get the message out to kids or get these people in these programs. I would love for you and some of your partners to maybe go there and perhaps set up some kind of, I don't know, whether it's a workforce industry day or whatever, and reach out to some of the high schools. There's some programs that they run through there, and just get the awareness out to bring some of the students into get them back into this field, as was kind of mentioned, a little earlier with the internship program and so forth. So if you can help me out with that and maybe pursue that, I would really appreciate it.
Let's connect on that, and certainly maybe we get, highlight for some of those students, talk about some of the jobs they can get for coming out with those skills.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Dwayne?
Just a quick statement. Thanks so much for the update. It was really good. I think one of the things that, and I probably brought this up at one of the previous meetings in Glenn, we talked about all of the money we're spending here and all of its impact economically, right? And so this is the avenue, right? Because the money goes out, contractors spend it, they hire the people and everything else. And I think we need to keep that message front and center at some point. It might be something that you can help develop as to because I know Glenn's been a little busy lately, but there is that economic component to it that we need to be touting, screaming from the top of the hill that these dollars repeat themselves, and the objectives of the Coastal Protection Restoration Authority has these benefits to the entirety of the state. So anything we can maybe work together to clear up those, put some of those figures and put some color on those things would be great.
I think we have some things from some older studies too that we can maybe pull together to help present a good picture.
That's it, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Cormier?
Thank you, Mr. Kirkpatrick. I appreciate everything that your organization does, and it's much needed. And I concur with Mr. Lane about Suella and Lake Charles. I would also encourage you to reach out maybe to some of those community colleges and maybe some of the STEM students that are currently taking classes in that. And also just wanted to point out that CPRA does a great job with their demonstration projects. So if there's anybody online watching that has a great idea for coastal Louisiana, I just encourage them to go ahead and investigate the CPRA program and suggest some of those projects. We've had a lot of great ideas from the past. And so kudos to your organization for supporting us. I can remember the years when we weren't sure there weren't going to be enough dredges for what we were envisioning for our $50 billion 50-year projects. And so I'm grateful for what y'all are doing, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Scott. And next speaker is Rudy Semino, CPRA Chief of Engineers. And I'd also like to thank Glenn Leday and Brent House and all the staff of CPRA for helping put this on, and of course Inga Kitchen, that is the office manager of the board, and thank you Inga for getting everything put together. And with that, we will have Mr. Rudy Semino, CPRA Chief of Engineers. Rudy.
Chairman Dove, just a quick update as an intro to this. I asked Mr. Semino to give a presentation really to one, educate the new board members on all the dredging work we do, but also kind of showcase all of the work that goes into it. I think sometimes, as Scott just mentioned, it gets lost that CPRA does some of the most dredging work really in the nation outside of the Corps of Engineers. So really a testament to kind of how far the program has come. But I want to really kind of showcase a lot that's gone into the education and engineering on all these projects. So appreciate the board listening.
Thank you, Glenn. Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Rudy Semino, Chief of Engineering at CPRA. Happy to present here today. And Scott brought up a good point, just to kind of recap in terms of collaboration with other
entities. 10 years ago, CPRA did not have really a presence in the dredging industry. We only did a couple projects a year at most. Now we actually have to track our projects and let some of our partners know when we're bidding so we can all coordinate to make sure there's enough equipment to do all the work that's needed to do navigation, dredging, as well as restoration. So hopefully this presentation will give you a feel for the magnitude of the dredging work that the agency puts forth, as well as its partners. I think a lot of people are familiar with this slide. It kind of shows all the stats, all the things CPRA has accomplished since its inception in 2007. And you see that 67,000 acres benefit. These numbers kind of put into perspective how much of that work's been accomplished using hydraulic dredging equipment. So you can see 18 barrier island projects, nearly 40 marsh creation projects. All of this sums a total of about 30,000 acres of marsh and dune and ridge habitat created since 2007. Total investment of nearly $3 billion. So taking a step back, when we talk about hydraulic dredging, if you've never been to a dredge site, you may not know much about what a hydraulic dredge does, or what it looks like, or how it operates. So hopefully the next couple of slides will put that into perspective. So you can see here, this is a very large vessel actually in the Mississippi River, dredging for our long distance sediment pipeline project. This is one of the largest dredges we'll see in the American fleet, owned by Weeks Marine. It's a 30-inch diameter pipe and pump that's moving material about 13 miles in this particular case. So you see a length of pipeline coming out of the back of the dredge, floating in the river. At one point, it will jump over the levee, over the land into the marsh. So you can see here, very large vessel, probably several people working on that vessel to keep it operating, dredging the Mississippi River. On the opposite end of the spectrum, this is a smaller dredge in Terrebonne Parish in Lake DeKalb. A much smaller piece of equipment owned by Apollo Environmental Services. We're right in the middle of Lake DeKalb, pumping material into some of the degraded marsh that surrounds Lake DeKalb. So give you a feel for the different types of equipment we see in the Gulf of Mexico. In the river, you would see the larger vessels, but in the inland bodies of water where the draft is the limiting factor, we would see a lot of pieces of equipment like this. Many of our ongoing jobs are seeing a lot of these smaller dredges and some new bidders from in many cases from Louisiana coming to the table owning this equipment to do work on our jobs. Regardless of the size of the vessel, you'll see the left side, every one of them has generally this component, which is the cutter head. And if you ever see a dredge with the cutter head out of the water, he's not being very productive. I think this particular picture was taken for showcasing purposes, but it gives you a feel for what that piece of equipment can do. It agitates the soil using that giant auger, or if you will, for lack of a better term, drill bit into the mud. There's a large pump on the ladder, pumping it. Usually there's a secondary pump on a dredge, and in many cases on our projects, booster pumps along the length of the pipeline to get it to its ultimate destination. The picture on the right is its destination. It's the outfall of that pipe. You can see a lot of pressure usually comes out of these pipes, and there's a lot of slurry and a lot of sand and material there. This is a sandy material. You see a piece of equipment working that material, spreading it around to reach our design grades and our design elevations. A little bit lesser known, but if we've done a lot of large-scale barrier islands, you may have seen some of this equipment. It's a hopper dredge. It looks, if you didn't know any better, you passed one in the Gulf of Mexico or river, you would swear it's just a normal ship. But this particular vessel does have arms that extend down to the water bottom, sucks that sediment into its hull, and actually sails with the load of sediment to its destination. You can see this vessel sitting pretty low. It is full of sediment, and it is probably in the process of sailing to its destination. To unload that sediment, these vessels actually, at least on our projects, have a pump out option. Some of them actually have doors on the bottom of it where the sediment can be released and dumped. You see a lot of that happening in the lower river at Head of Passes as the core dredges Southwest Pass and dumps it at the Head of Passes location. This particular vessel is over in the Calcasieu Ship Channel, moored adjacent to the westernmost jetty. This is from the 2013-2014 time frame when we rebuilt the beach along Cameron shoreline. So the location says Calabasas Strip Channel, however, the dredge material came from many miles offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. That vessel actually sailed in, docked there, then pumped its sediment out. Generally, it's on the range of about 3,000 to 5,000 cubic yards per load, depending on the size of the hopper vessel. This particular contractor, Weeks Marine, actually used 2 of these vessels, actually concurrently swapping them out, sailing, dredging, while one was pumping. The pump out process here took about 4 hours, so it's not the most efficient way to deliver sand, but in deep water in the Gulf of Mexico, it's oftentimes difficult to have a direct pipeline from the dredge to the shore, which is here. We wanted to get the best sand possible, and that's difficult to find in this part of the state, so we went as far offshore as we could and used these hopper dredges. It's more than just the dredge. Obviously, these are all the pieces of equipment and materials that you would see on most typical marsh creation, barrel island dredging jobs. Of course, you see the dredge there on the top left, but then you see the pipeline. This pipeline varies in size from as small as maybe 10 or 12 inches on the smaller equipment to 30 inches or more on the larger pieces of equipment. Top right picture is actually a supplementary pump, a booster pump that would be docked somewhere in the midpoint or so otherwise of the dredge pipeline alignment. You see the tracked excavator unloading off of a barge to build usually earth and containment dikes to help work the material. We'll discuss that a little bit later. In some cases, we have barge mounted equipment building earth and containment dikes, and in some cases, if the earth and containment dikes are exposed to high wave energy environment, we will protect them with concrete mats, as you see on that bottom right picture. So it's always more than just the dredge and the pipe and pumping. It's a lot more that goes into getting all these projects onto the ground. What types of projects are we building with hydraulic dredges? Let's start with Barrow Islands. The areas highlighted in red, this is kind of focusing on southeast Louisiana, are all the Barrow Islands that we have investigated and looked to build projects on, many of which have been constructed. So we're very proud of the Barrow Island work we've done. A large part of that has been done using the Deepwater Horizon funds and done in the recent years. One project that was completed in the recent years, actually last year, is the West Grand Terre project. And this little drone video, which is really well done, will kind of give you a perspective of what one of these sites looks like. So this pipe is split. This contractor is actually turning one side off and on, alternating to let the material settle off. You see those lateral banks he's built? That gives that lets that water run off and gives that sediment time to drop out, and then he'll work it with bulldozers and other pieces of earth and moving material as the sediment comes out. But it gives you the scale, it gives you all the things that are going on an island. It's pretty busy. The elevation is critical on these projects. Some of these barrier islands are built to as high as a +6 or +8 in many cases. You can see the dune right down the middle with the sand fence on it, as well as the completed beach at West Grand Terre Island. Marsh creation, and this is as you saw from the earlier slide, most of the hydraulic dredging work that we contract here at CPRA is our marsh creation projects all over the coast. We're doing them. But you can kind of see moving left to right the process. There's the end of our dredge pipeline with the slurry coming out. Construction is complete in that middle case, and you can see there that picture is pretty flat and really not a lot of vegetation. This particular site that has these pictures is Mississippi River sediment. It actually vegetates quite well on its own. So you can see that right picture is a year later. So we have a good, healthy, functional marsh, and we were able to control that elevation of that field really well with the river sand, which is one of the reasons we like to dredge river sediment to build marsh creation. I'll give you 2 examples of a marsh creation project, and they're totally different. I think it's important to kind of understand the difference here. This is Spanish Pass, a project we completed last year, one of our biggest marsh creation projects, I think over 1,600 acres. But it gives you a feel that there's this river sand that near Venice coming out of that pipe. Zooming back, the river's in the background, you can just see the magnitude of the land that we're building here, converting open water into 1,600 acres of marsh. But that sand is dropping out, it's settling immediately. It requires a bulldozer and another piece of earth moving equipment to actually move it around. Constantly adding links to that pipe so they can move on and really control that elevation, control how that sediment distributes throughout the site. The second site's over at Lake Bourne in St. Bernard Parish, of the largest project we've ever built. So I won't say one of, over 2,000 acres. This is not sandy material. This is clays and silts
You're not gonna see any bulldozers on this site, because you wouldn't see them for long. Basically, this is very soft material that's really distributed and stayed in a liquid form as that flows across these very large sites. So that gives you a perspective of what we're dealing with, depending on the type of material. You also saw that dredge slurry outfall is a lot less impressive on this project than it was in Spanish Pass. This is a much smaller piece of equipment, just because of the draft in Lake Borgne, in terms of what equipment we could get in. The next several slides I think will look pretty familiar to you. We'll summarize the annual plan, but I'll really just highlight the hydraulic dredging work in this current annual plan. So we'll kind of go through the regions, starting on the southwest, moving to the middle, and then to the southeast, and then we'll just kind of highlight some of those dredging projects in each region. So just to kind of sum it up, we're anticipating 19, actually I think it's 21 if you count, so I think we might have added a couple there. But over nearly 70 million cubic yards and 12,000 acres. So just in this annual plan, under construction, we'll have 12,000 acres. If you go back to the previous slide there, one of the beginning slides, you can see now that even though we've built a lot of projects since 2007, the larger projects are starting to hit the ground now. So once again, we're getting nearly 13,000 acres in one fiscal year in hydraulic dredging project. That's a product of the large-scale projects we're seeing out of the oil spill dollars. Starting in the southwest region, you see two projects there, the No-Name Bayou project, which recently opened bids and started construction, and then the Calcasieu Sabine large-scale marsh creation and hydrologic restoration. We anticipate some components of these projects being under construction in this fiscal year. One thing I'll highlight, this is a recently completed project, but it's Long Point Bayou, just to give you a perspective. This is sediment from the Calcasieu Ship Channel being dredged and pumped to a large cell off the channel. But it gives you a feel for what marsh creation looks like in this part of the state. You actually have decent saws in terms of building containment dikes. We're actually working with the Corps to do some navigation dredging to build marsh creation here, which we haven't done a lot of historically, but we were very successful on this project to collaborate with the Corps to do that. And I know Laura Shaker is very happy about that. So you can see here, this is a decent sized piece of equipment. You see the mud flowing out. Once again, you're not going to see a bulldozer on this site. You're going to let that stuff settle down. It'll de-water. All that water is actually flowing through some outfall structures very far from the end of this pipe to give that maximum amount of retaining time. Let that sediment drop out, and then we'll start seeing good marsh there. And the second project there is one of our larger efforts that the agency's working on. A lot going on here. It's a complete program where we have drainage structures along the perimeter levee of the Cameron Creole watershed at Calcasieu Lake, as well as some interior drainage to get some water moving through there. And then to actually, rather than just putting that material on the spall bank or disposing of it, we're going to try to build marsh. And you can see all those green polygons are some marsh options that we can build while we're dredging the interior of this watershed. Moving to the south central, you can see here a couple projects in Terrebonne. We have a big project near Fouchon that should be hitting the ground, as well as Island Road, which is up near the community of Point Shannon. So once again, the big project we'll highlight here is the West Bell Pass headland repairs. One of the first projects, if I'm not mistaken, that we'll receive some FEMA dollars for due to some damage it received from Hurricane Zeta. But you can see here, this is Bayou Lafourche on your far right. Bell Pass is where Bayou Lafourche meets the Gulf. We're going to find some great sand out in the Gulf of Mexico at Ship Show. Get that sand interior, likely with hopper dredges, and rebuild an extension of that Bell Pass headland, moving to the westward direction. Then in the southeast, where you really see a concentration of a lot of marsh creation, mainly from a product of a lot of areas here were impacted by the 2010 oil spill. So there's been a big investment. But you can see the Delacroix area, projects 9, 10, 11, 12, all in that area, could be potentially hitting construction this year, as well as some North Shore projects nearby Kane. And then you see the La Branch project that Glenn highlighted earlier, number 13, on the south shore of Lake Pontchartrain. The second slide of this is just continuing more marsh creation projects in this area. So one of the things I want to talk about, I mentioned it briefly earlier, was our ability and really our purpose behind dredging the Mississippi River. There is a lot pile sediment in the Mississippi River. We identified that as early as the mid-2000s when we started designing our first project to build marsh out of the river. But then when the oil spill happened in 2010, we realized there would be a big investment, particularly in Barataria Basin in marsh creation. So we decided we had to come up with a plan to be more organized as to how we can innovate and really prioritize some of these dredging sites. So we actually identified 6 dredging areas in the Mississippi River. The northern portion is Wills Point for perspective. The southern portion is just beyond Point Lahash. And once again, these are point bars. These are sandbars on the outside of the channel of the Mississippi River. And the actual channel of the Mississippi River in this region of the river is too deep to dredge. Most dredge equipment cannot reach the sediment at the bottom of the channel. So we actually occupy the sandbars that are on the banks. And so there's only about 6 locations there. This gives you about between 50 and 60 million cubic yards total available between Wills Point and Point Lahash in this part of the state. But looking at where we would focus our master plan projects if we were to receive settlement dollars in the 2010 timeframe, we identified 2 areas that could potentially be viewed as very high land loss areas that could take advantage of this sediment. So we'll start with Alliance. And just to give you a perspective where you're at, you see the Mississippi River on your right, Barataria Waterway on the left, the Alliance Refinery is the location we'll focus on. You'll see the bottom end of that sandbar at the top of the screen there. And we established a permitted corridor that we could have permitted and ready to use at any given moment that a project could be ready to go to be designed and go to construction. So we did the upfront planning, environmental work, and to some degree the engineering work. Therefore, we could have many different projects spin off of this particular location. And we were very successful in that. You can see the green represents about 3,000 acres of marsh creation projects that have been built to date. These are all completed. That all came from that single borrow source, from that single corridor. Once that corridor, that borrow source is dredged, it takes anywhere between 3 and 5 years to regenerate. So we'll empty the hole, and Mother Nature actually refills it for us. It does take about 5 years to do so, depending on what the river gives you. So there is a gap between projects, if you will. However, it is what we consider a perpetual sediment resource. That sums it up. There's 6 total projects. We were able to implement those over 3 construction contracts. And as I mentioned, 3,000 acres with an investment of over $300 million. Very similar, we'll go down to Point Lahash, where we also identified 2 borrow pits here, 2 very large borrow pits. And we established a corridor to actually go all the way to the Bayou Grand Chenier location, as well as adjacent to the Grand Bayou area. As Glenn mentioned, we have a lot of work going on in this area. The green polygons represent completed projects. You see the Lake Hermitage area to the northern part of the corridor, which was completed in the 2015-2016 timeframe, as well as those green polygons on the bottom that are the Grand Chenier project that Glenn mentioned. And the 3 yellow polygons are projects that are in design. Grand Bayou Phase 1 is actually being bid as we speak, and Grand Bayou Phase 2, which is a little bit further to the right, is the project that we're currently designing to complement everything else here. So nearly 2,100 acres and an investment of over $245 million with some future opportunities to build additional marsh. You do see some open water in there, so there are some opportunities to continue to build here, pending the water depths and oil and gas infrastructure that may be present, which is pretty heavy in this area. So this is the closing part of my presentation. I'll kind of get into talked about the dredging. It seems pretty easy. You put a dredge in a body of water, you put some pipeline out, you pump it. I'll kind of give you a perspective of everything else it takes to get those projects to be built. And it starts with the small earth and containment levees. We've built a lot of these on a lot of these projects, particularly those projects that are soft sediments, the clays, the silts. Some of the river dredging projects may not need some of the earth and containment dikes because they can kind of build up on their own. But in terms of the projects that have a heavy, small concentration of sediment, a lot of slurry, we have to contain them. So you kind of see here that excavator sitting on what we call a stability berm, which is kind of a safety barrier between the toe of that dike and that borrow channel, which is on the inside, typically. Therefore, when we pump the mud in, it refills that hole. So we're kind of mitigating our impact, if you will. And then you see the small levee on the left. This is over in Southwest Louisiana. This is the Long Point Bayou project, and I say this because I know there's a lot of engineers and and planners and other folks in the room who have seen these earth containment decks, this is by far some of the best earth containment decks we've ever built, coming off the Long Point Bayou area. You see very plastic clay being piled up in that first top left picture. You see a second machine grading that down, and that final product at the bottom is just as well as it can be built to the grades, to the lines that it was constructed. Move into Southeast Louisiana, you do see a higher presence of organic material, a lot less clay, and you will see the dikes look a little bit different, and we do encounter a lot of failures during construction as well. Stakeholder coordination. We're not the only people using the coast, right? There's a lot going on a day-to-day basis in terms of oil and gas, in terms of fisheries, in terms of private landowners. A lot of the coast is privately owned. So as we design these projects, and not just the projects themselves, but how we can get equipment to these projects, we have to consider all of these factors and coordinate properly. The last thing we want to do is be on someone's property when they were not aware of that, or dig on someone's property, or worst case scenario, interrupt a piece of oil and gas infrastructure that exists in part of our coast. And these are my last couple slides, and I really love this video, this picture, but this will really give you a good perspective of what a large hydraulic dredge looks like as she's operating. So just to kind of set this up, you see the Mississippi River channel, where once again, we're off to the sandbar that's adjacent to the channel. So obviously deep drafts coming through. We have a pipeline that's on the adjacent side. We need to actually get that pipeline to the other side. So we're going to go under the channel. So we're going to actually put our pipe on the bottom of the channel, and in most cases bury it. And then the marsh creation area is actually out there to the top left. This is Spanish Pass, a project that was completed. And the next kind of shows the video of that dredge sweeping back and forth on those spuds as she pumps the sediment from point A to point B. You see deep draft passing. That vessel that's going backwards there that gets lost is actually a hopper dredge doing navigation dredging for the Corps. I'll replay it there. But you see tugs. These vessels are not self-propelled, so they actually have a tug to support them. But you see a lot going on. A lot of coordination takes place, not just with the navigation interest, but with the parish, with the Coast Guard, as well as the fishermen. I think that is my last slide. Thank you for the opportunity to present. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Thanks, Rudy. Great presentation. I want you to help me try and understand something kind of hypothetically and theoretically. So, a long distance sediment pipeline, you talked about, 6 or 7 projects through the Delaware area, through Plaquemines, all the way through St. Bernard. So with that corridor, do you build that corridor all the way to its final destination first, or do you branch off and build marsh creations along the way? How does that look? Because, I know a lot of these projects here already have a sediment source in Lake Leary and so forth, or whatever. But in the quicker world, it's getting to a point where it's getting exhausted, and I think this is going to be the future for this entire basin. So I'd just like, and President Hinckley, I'm sure, is curious about this question too. How does that look with that corridor?
That's a great question, John. Thank you. So in the case of the East Bank, West Bank long distance corridor, one at Alliance, we built the entire corridor. We went ahead, and there was a lot of environmental work because you are, actually building higher elevations. It's a small ridge that we built with that pipeline. So in the case of where we did build that corridor, the entire thing was built from the Mississippi River to the Barrier Waterway. So obviously funding is necessary to do that, so there could be some restraints there. But if you're going to go through that process of planning and permitting it, and you have an opportunity, building the entire thing would be advantageous and attractive to other projects. The Point LaHatch area, we actually didn't build anything. We just put the pipeline on the bottom of a canal that was sufficiently deep. So generally, you either want that large 30-inch dredge pipeline on land, or you want it under the water. And in that water, you need to be probably 6 or 7 feet deep. So we had the luxury of a man-made canal, the Jefferson Canal, that we were able to put that pipe in, and it stays under the water. Obviously, there was a little regulatory work there, but from the standpoint of building anything, we just had the contractor install it off to the side of the canal in a sufficiently deep area. The vessels that drop the pipe and install it generally draft 5 or 6 feet, so you need a canal that deep, or you need dry land to put it on. You don't want to put that pipeline on the existing marsh. Obviously, you know what happened there. You see a permanent scar across that marsh. So to answer your question on the West Bank corridor out of lines, we built the whole thing. On the house, we didn't build anything. It's all under the water.
Sir, Mr. Bourgeois?
Yeah, great presentation, Rudy. The thing about it is, it was a presentation about dredging that really wasn't about dredging. It was all about marsh creation and building barrier islands and things of that nature. I think that's the point that gets missed on this, right? The entire dredging industry for hundreds of years now, that was really principally a navigation focus up and down the river, was focused on just that. And the extent to which the CPRA and the engineers working for the CPRA were able to take that technology, because the dredges are just a means to the end, right? Take that technology and come up with all of these options to be able to work in the spaces that we need to work, is probably not recognized as much as it was. I mean, really move the ball on what dredging technology can do beyond it, because, in a lot of places in the United States, dredging doesn't have that crystal clear connotation. They just think it's for a different purpose. Believe it or not, people in the United States don't think levees are a good thing, right? For whatever reason, they think, well, we just need to make room for the river. And so the same thing with us using these dredges for all these purposes. I don't think it gets understood how far we've moved state of the art in the capability of what these various types of dredges can do. I just want to point that out.
Appreciate that, Mr. Bourgeois. And once again, we always say that dredgers just want to create a hole. That's what they're paid to do, is create holes somewhere. What do we do with that hole is the product that we want to create, the sediment in that hole. So how you write your specs, how you design your projects, how you collaborate. And I think Scott's really opened up the doors on how we collaborate with industry to take, you're here to dig a hole or somewhere under the water. We need that sediment to build marsh, to build barrier islands. It's critical.
Ms. Cartier?
Yes, thank you for your presentation, Rudy. And I just want to piggyback on what Dwayne said, that I would love to see 100% of the sediment that is used, that is dredged by the Corps of Engineers in Southwest Louisiana and Southeastern Louisiana. I'm not sure if that's, I know they have a 50-yard rule or something. They can only send sediment so far. So we might need legislation to change that. But also, we have a permanent pipeline in Southwest Louisiana, and so I want to see that used as well. But it was beautiful to see how beautiful the earthen dikes are in Southwest. So thank you for everything y'all have done.
Thank you, Ms. Cormier. And just want to make a note, we're continuing to work hard with the Corps, and the Corps is working hard with us to continue to increase BudMat, beneficial use of dredge material. That's why we love to show Long Point. And then, as you know, we're working towards that on CS 87, the Calcasieu Sabine large-scale marsh creation. And so with that, there's always going to be hurdles that we have to overcome. But, once you get there, then you can start to make the process more efficient. So I know both the Corps and CPRA are working hard on that. That's a great point.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Sit down. Yes, sir. As we all know, there's a lot of material in the Chapelai River. And we're looking forward to that permanent pipeline that will be able to take it out of the Chapelai and send it to the east to Terrebonne in the areas that need the sediment and material. So just to put that reminder out.
I believe Terrebonne and LaFouche should take all you will give us. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I said Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Colville.
Thank you, Mr. Semino. I was curious, in the logistics part of your presentation, in your experience, is it customary that the dredging companies, when you're advertising for bids, they generally will bid on the project and then they go hire all of the other equipment needed to move the sediment around and move the pipe around? Generally, all of that equipment, they have the dredge and they have the pipe, and then they sub the vast majority of that other work out. Is that in your experience, is that customary?
It depends on the contractor. I would say yes, you would see, because when we look at the earthen containment dikes, you're looking at 20,000 linear feet, 30,000 linear feet. It involves multiple marsh projects, in some cases 4, 5, 6 marsh projects. So some of the dredge contractors have their own equipment, but to that degree, no. So they'll use a subcontractor to do a lot of that work.
And just for my edification, what you showed, the vast majority of what you showed is actually what CPRA is delivering. It did or did not include any core, sort of funded orchestrated projects. Is that a fair assumption?
The Long Point Bayou project was a collaboration using restoration dollars and core navigation dredging dollars. So we knew the Corps has to dredge the capture ship channel. They usually dispose of it in the CDFs, as you know. We were able to collaborate them and say, look, we will contribute to your project if you want to pump it a little bit further to this area. So we were able to get a full project at a much lower cost by just tacking on to a core contract. That was a construction contract issued by the Corps.
And is it a fair assessment, my last bite at the apple, assumption that that was CPRA money, it wasn't through any other program like CPRA or whatever?
It's interesting, the project was designed using CPRA dollars, and it was originally nominated using CPRA dollars. And we actually used LOSCO money, all spill money from another LOSCO unrelated to BP to actually contribute to our construction side. So we let the CPRA program have their construction dollars back. We utilized LOSCO money, also money to do so.
Fantastic, nice work.
I have a quick question. I'm not sure what kind of project we have in the future, but are you familiar with the Intercoastal Canal around Chef Pass, that area?
Somewhat, yes, sir.
Okay, well, there's an area there, well, there's a community that's called Venetian Isles. I live in that area, but there are a lot of commercial fishermen that live there, that park their boats, dock their boats in back of their house. During high tide, they can get their boat out, but during low tide, the sun's built up along the intercoastal canal that oftentimes can indicate Islands. You can see the dirt. So I'm not sure what kind of projects you have in the future, but and probably this is one of those very small things that you can do for a community very quickly and help hundreds of commercial fishermen that live around the area.
Sure. Happy to discuss it with you after. I think there are some potential options there.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Any other questions? With that, we thank you all, very, very informative. And the next speaker will be the 2024 legislative session and drive update, Mr. Clay Parker with GOKA. Mr. Parker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, board members. I am Clay Parker, Special Counsel for the Governor's Office of Coastal Activities. I've also been assisting the Department of Energy and Natural Resources in their reorganization efforts under Executive Order JML 2413. We lovingly refer to this project as DRIVE. It's our little acronym, Departmental Review for Innovation and Visionary Enhancement. So without further ado, we'll just jump right into it. Just an overview of some of the things that we'll be talking about today. I'm going to go over the purpose of the project, the why we are doing this. From the very beginning, this has not been about change just for change's sake. It's been about a defined purpose. We'll go over that first. Then we'll talk about some of the issues with some of the current natural resource management regime, some of the issues that are upcoming. We all know about the fiscal cliff impending next year and the potential fiscal cliff down the road in 2031 for coastal dollars. Then we'll go over some of the legislative changes that are going to be happening this session, potentially next session if necessary. We'll go over two very specific bills this session that pertain to the DRIVE project directly. And then we'll go through some of the review that's going to come after this session in the form of the Natural Resource Steering Commission, a project timeline, and then the reporting that everyone can expect as we go forward in this process. Again, our purpose is not change just for change's sake. We have defined 4 very clear purposes for the project: transparency, efficiency and coordination, both within and without DE&R, interagency and intraagency, clear and intuitive governance, and sustainability in the sense of preparing natural resources management, preparing the agency, preparing the state for the next 50 years. Let's talk about transparency and sustainability. Transparency and sustainability, we want this project to be out in the open, everyone to see everything about the project and what we're doing. We are trying to build a basis for continuous improvement of DE&R, of the state's natural resources management as a whole. Like I said, we have a fiscal cliff upcoming for next year to the tune of $558 million, give or take. There's also the coastal fiscal cliff upcoming in 2031. So we're trying to look forward, be a little bit more proactive than reactive to prepare for those fiscal cliffs and prepare us for the future. On the note of efficiency and coordination, this little graphic on this slide demonstrates just a snapshot of the current natural resource management regime. You can see how there's a lot of entities involved. It seems a little fractured, a lot of moving parts. So the idea behind the project is improve efficiency and coordination. We're talking about streamlining, optimizing, coordinating across agencies. For example, agencies are not able to share data and collaborate together. That's something that we're hoping to change with this project. Emergency response and risk management, for example, we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but the Louisiana Oil Spill Coordinator's Office is currently located in Department of Public Safety. There's a bill in session this year to move that to DE&R and in-house those enforcement functions to the Department of Energy and Natural Resources. And then also to start to coordinate natural resources infrastructure, to manage natural resources infrastructure that in a way that complements the state's overall needs. Basically, again, have everybody pulling in the same direction. Improve efficiency, coordinate everyone's actions. For clear and intuitive governance, this graphic here is just a snapshot of the agencies that touch on water. I think there's 14 agencies that touch on water resource management in the state. And so the goal of DRIVE with clear and intuitive governance is to revise, develop, create strategic plans for natural resources management, again, so that everybody is pulling in the same direction. Align and streamline not only DE&R, but help with all agencies, collaboration, coordination. Create some uniform guidance so that people working with DE&R can see and know what the process is going to be, for example, with the permits. And then clarifying relationships between DE&R and other governmental and quasi-governmental entities. So some of the issues that we've identified as we got into this project, DE&R was founded back in 1976. And since 1976, there has not been a major reorganization effort for DE&R, whereas other state agencies have undergone multiple reorganizations. This has resulted in bureaucratic hurdles within and without the agency, fractured management. One specific example within the agency is the firewall between the Secretary's office and the Commissioner of Conservation. Those two individuals within the same agency are really not allowed to collaborate on hardly anything at all. And that provision is a result of that bureaucratic hurdle. And it's one of these things that we are trying to help clean up, streamline things, make operations more effective. Another issue on the finance side that we've identified is there's a lack of engagement and expertise in the finance and the banking sector with respect to natural resource management. The Natural Resource Trust Authority that we will talk about in a second is an outgrowth of that issue. And then again, the impending fiscal cliff. There's going to be a shortfall next year, and the agency needs to prepare for that. Not only prepare for that, but prepare for the future. So DRIVE is meant to provide a balanced approach to this issues with the state's natural resources. It's meant to integrate DE&R, improve it, and align goals and resources. So a little bit of background about the project for those that may not be entirely familiar. Back on February 2nd, Governor Landry issued Executive Order JML 24-13. That order directed the ENR to investigate consolidation and reorganization of the state's natural resources management. So once that executive order was issued, the ENR consulted with multiple stakeholders and also considered public comments from governmental entities, non-governmental entities, and from the general public. After considering those comments, on February 23rd, the agency issued a request for executive action to Governor Landry, laying out the background and the research that has been done so far and requesting the governor to identify any needed legislative changes. And on March 11th, I apologize, Governor Landry issued a letter to DENR, which created the Natural Resource Steering Commission that again we'll discuss in a second. And it also directed several legislative changes to be made. And that's what we're going to get into next. So there were several legislative changes included in the March 11th letter to the ENR. First was to create the offices of enforcement, energy, and land and water within the department. We were also told to recreate the Office of Conservation and the Energy Office, establish a Natural Resource Trust Authority, align the sunsets of natural resource related boards and commissions to coincide with the sunset of the agency as a whole, and then transfer several programs to the new Office of Enforcement. That would be the Fisherman's Gear Fund, oil field site restoration, oyster lease damage evaluation, and then also to move WASCO from the Department of Public Safety to the new Office of Enforcement. Another legislative change requested by Governor Landry was to grant authority over water resources management as to quantity to the new Office of Land and Water, and to also grant them authority over right-of-way, surface lease, water bottom permits, which are currently located with the Office of State Lands. The last change requested by Governor Landry was to remove certain members of the CPRA board to reduce overlap of the governor's cabinet. So we'll get into the bills now that were filed based on this. First bill is House Bill 806, authored by Representative Brett Guyman, Chairman of House Natural Resources. This is the bill that provides for the change of membership of the CPRA board. Parenthetically, Governor Landry requested the removal of Department of Wildlife and Fisheries and Department of Environmental Quality. After considering public and stakeholder comment, 806 actually did not make that change because those agencies are trustees, and it was determined that it was best to include those agencies in their trustee capacity. So 806 removes the DOTD position, the LED position, the Commissioner of Administration, the Commissioner of Agriculture, the Commissioner of Insurance, and the GOSEP representative. This bill was heard yesterday in the House Natural Resources Committee, and it was reported favorably by a vote of 10-1. So it will now head to House floor for final passage. The second bill for this session is House Bill 810. It is authored by Representatives Brett Guyman and Jacob Landry. This is the Department of Energy and Natural Resources Reorganization Bill. It creates the offices of Energy, Enforcement, and Land and Water. It creates the Natural Resources Trust Authority. It transfers WASCO to the Department of Energy and Natural Resources. It removes that firewall that we talked about that has been in place since 1976 between the Commissioner of Conservation and the DENR Secretary. It grants authority over the right-of-way, leasing, water bottoms that we talked about earlier to DENR, and it was reported with amendments unanimously yesterday in House Natural Resources. Now, the only amendment I would classify more as a technical amendment than anything. It was just to change the effective date from signature of the governor to July 1st to coincide with the new fiscal year. This chart provides a graphic for the proposed organizational structure in House Bill 810, and this covers all of the natural resources management regime. So you can see the Natural Resource Steering Commission off by itself. Like I said, we'll talk about that in just a second. And then CPRA off by itself as well, and then DENR, the three major players in this reorganization effort. DENR's new organization will include the Office of the Secretary, Management, Budget, and Finance, the Office of Conservation, the Energy Office, the Office of Enforcement, and the Office of Land and Water. We're going to go over a little bit of what each of those offices do. The Secretary is going to provide support functions for DENR, focused on intra and intergovernmental affairs. The Secretary's office is going to provide that administrative support for the entire agency. Management and budget will be the financial backbone of DENR. They'll house human resources, fiscal, and they will house the Natural Resources Trust Authority. The Energy Office is going to have a direct relationship with the Federal Department of Energy. Their focus is going to be more on research and policy, on strategic planning, public engagement, creating partnerships, and other forward-looking activities. Conservation is going to be an office focused on permitting, regulatory, and compliance. Enforcement is going to be focused on out-of-compliance operators. And Land and Water is going to house those programmatic and management functions for land, water, and minerals. Now, as promised, we'll talk about the Natural Resource Steering Commission. It was created by Governor Landry in that March 11th letter. There's 3 members currently of the Natural Resource Steering Commission. Mr. Gordon Dove is chair of the Natural Resource Steering Commission. Secretary Tyler Gray is also a member, and Commissioner of Conservation for the Office of Conservation, Benjamin Bienvenu, is also a member. Its purpose is to review and coordinate all natural resources management aspects in coordination with the goals of the DRIVE project. So in plain English, that is the public-facing component of this project to receive the recommendations by the Department of Energy and Natural Resources and their offices for how they intend to reorganize, consider those in a public forum, consider any public comments that are issued, and then issue the final recommendations on reorganization. The planned first committee meeting for the Natural Resource Steering Commission will be June 18th at 9 a.m. Location is TBD, but it will definitely be in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That's going to be an initial presentation by the DENR offices of the proposed natural resource structure, again focused within DENR, and public comment afterwards. There's an additional meeting tentative in July. It has not been scheduled yet, but that will be final presentation following a period of public comment for the proposed structure of DENR. And we'll talk timeline now. So yesterday, HB 806 and 810 were heard in the House Natural Resources Committee. Both of them made it out of committee. So going forward, session adjourns by June 3rd. We will be monitoring 806 and 810 throughout the legislative process, assuming that those bills pass. Following session, DENR will review the final versions of those bills and prepare their reports for the Natural Resources Steering Commission. Again, June 18th will be the first Natural Resource Steering Commission meeting and the first round of public comment on the proposed reorganization. In July, there is a tentative second meeting, again, following that first round of public comment on the proposals by the offices. That will be the chance for the steering commission and the public to see the final proposals, receive any public comments, and then August 1st is the deadline for the final project report to the governor's office. That will be submitted by the members of the steering commission based on the final reports of the offices and any public comment thereafter. From August to October of 2024, the agency is going to review the final report, participate in public engagement, and prepare their executive budget submissions for next fiscal year, which are due October 31st, 2024. And then 2025 will be legislative cleanup from the reorganization process, changing any statutes that have to be changed, and any other necessary changes arising out of the reorganization and the recommendations made by the steering commission. And lastly, we'll talk about reporting. So what sort of reports can we expect coming from both DENR and from the steering commission going forward? I've included the link to the governor's page on this matter in this slide, and also some instructions under the Interact tab of the governor's website. You can navigate to the page on this executive order by finding the link to action on Executive Order JML 24-13. That will include every public document as well as the public comment forum. Now, going forward, we will have some upcoming reports coming out. In June 2024, all materials that are presented by the DENR offices to the steering commission will be available on that public forum. In July 2024, the public comments based on those proposed reorganizations will be available, and any materials from the second steering commission meeting. Again, that would be the presentations presented by the offices of DENR. In August 2024, we will have the final report from the steering commission to the governor with the final recommendations for project changes. And then on October 31st, 2024, again, we'll be submitting our executive budget. I know that was quick. I know that was a lot of information all at once. So I've included my contact information here for any member of the board to contact me, talk to me about this. I'm available. The DENR staff are also available. Secretary Gray is available. You can contact any of us to schedule a meeting if you want to talk about this more or have any questions. But with that, I'll open it up to any questions from the board.
And Mr. Parker, I want to thank you. It's very informative, very comprehensive, and I know you've done some hard work on it, and we thank you for it. And with that, I think we have Ms. Cormier would like to ask you a question.
Yeah, Mr. Parker, that was a lot of information. I appreciate it. I have two questions. One of which, on your slide number 4, the purpose of transparency and sustainability, it refers to, under the sustainability section, the agency. Can you tell me what agency that is?
DENR, Department of Energy and Natural Resources.
And question 2, as all this is going on, I just want to make sure for the citizens of Southwest Louisiana that it's not a slowdown in any way, shape, or form of the projects that are already in place. Because as we all know, we got hit by 4 federally declared disasters in Southwest Louisiana, and we need those projects on the ground yesterday, and they're not there. We have a hurricane season coming up, and on our next agenda, I hope we're talking about that, about the hurricane season. But to ask you the question, point blank, this in no means slows down any of our projects financially or moving forward on any other aspect.
No, the intent is not to change any of these projects at all or to slow them down. It's just to reorganize the department in a way that makes it more sustainable. Like I said, for the next 50 years, how do we make sure that DENR and the natural resources management on the whole is sustainable?
And I can assure you too, given the discussions I've been with the governor and everyone involved, everything is full steam ahead. The CPRA under Glenn Leday is going to expedite. We're going to move expeditiously on all the projects, and you know we realize that the next hurricane season is right around the corner. Yeah. So you know that's the way I understand it. Yes, Mr. Bourgeois.
Good presentation, Clay, and just want to thank you guys for the time you're putting into this. I know you spent 2 hours with me on a Friday afternoon, so if anybody can imagine the pain of that, Dustin bailed a little early, but you and Daniel stayed with me, so I do appreciate the input to that. The one thing that I was looking at in your presentation when you gave the timeline, it started tracking the 2 bills. but the committee's evaluations and report limited to the two bills? Because the timeline shows just the two bills, but I would think that they're gonna be looking at other things as the public comment comes into place. I was just hoping you could clarify that.
So the commission's main job is to look at that reorganization of the Department of Energy and Natural Resources. But 810, correct. As we go forward, that commission's review may grow organically to include other issues, but at the moment it's focused on the reorganization. Especially that June 18th meeting is focused on the reorganization.
Right. Okay. That was it.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Colvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Parker. First off, I'd like to applaud the governor and Mr. Gray and my colleague over there, Mr. Davidson, and you for the hard work you guys and the vision that you put in, because it does need a real critical look at everything we've been doing. So I applaud you guys for that effort. But getting into the specifics a little bit, could you help me find in your reorg proposal where wetland permitting will land, in which office?
So permitting is going to be housed within conservation.
Okay, I saw that, so I just sort of assumed it might be oil and gas permitting, but what you're saying is all permitting.
Correct.
Wetland, oil and gas development,
Correct.
whatever it might be, is all gonna land under, well, you guys write small for old people, Office of Conservation. Is that a fair assessment?
So the idea is to create a one-stop shop for permitting. If I need a permit of any kind, conservation is where I'm going.
Okay, and so along those lines, is it safe to assume, or maybe I could offer my unsolicited opinion, as it evolves, will you guys potentially consider wetland permitting and restoration projects moving down one path and sort of development projects, for lack of a better term, moving down another path? Would that be a consideration as this group evolves and as this program evolves?
As it evolves, I would say that certainly we will take this as a chance to consider any avenue to improve and modernize natural resources management. For permitting specifically at this short-term juncture, we're looking at just those initiatives that the governor identified, but long-term, we can certainly look into those issues.
I would encourage you guys to do that, because that's been a criticism, a long-term criticism, is, you know, I'm going to use CPRA projects as they've developed, and they spend occasionally an inordinate amount of time being developed by some of the best brains, engineering, biological minds, forever. And then it drives me insane when federal agencies do it. They say, well, I got to take my wetland planning hat off. I have to put my regulatory hat on, which drives me nuts. But you really had an inordinate amount of time spent developing these projects, and then to go and put it through another painstaking process of evaluation and analysis. You know, my feeling has always been, good gracious, we beat this dead horse for over several years, and now we're going to go and start making sure it's completely dead. And by that time, the whole project and the restoration need has completely changed. And it's definitely a challenge, and I know you guys are up to the task of dealing with it, but it would certainly be something to consider as you guys move forward and evolve. So I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. I'll definitely pass that on to the experts over at DENR. I'm not going to sit here and call myself a permitting expert, but I know that those guys are, so I'll pass that on.
Mr. Davidson?
Yeah, I just want to comment on that, Chad. So, you know, after talking with you a lot about this, I can definitely tell you that looking at the way we do permitting is a top priority for us. Just an example, you know, in talking with the Corps, we've identified some opportunities to take some permitting authority away from the Corps and do it in-house here. For example, Section 404, there is an opportunity for us to take that over at the state level. And so those are the things that we're specifically looking at right now. You know, I've also talked with you about the timeline over federal permits versus state permits. That's definitely on the table as well. You know, we want to figure out a way to do this as quickly as possible so that we don't have to deal with the length of time in terms of permitting, increasing the cost of project, the ability or possibility of projects having to change over time. I think Clay mentioned it pretty well, is we're looking at this as an opportunity to build out an agency that is not going to be changed after this, right? We want to build a almost perfect situation to where, when we're all long and gone, some of these same processes will still be involved. And one more thing I want to highlight in Clay's presentation is that Natural Resources Finance Trust. That's something that we have looked at long and hard as an opportunity to provide financial assurance to operators to deal with that orphan well problem and generating some revenue off of that. We look at many different ways to bond out funding to do different projects, and so again, this process is not just change for change sake. It's an opportunity for us to try to be as creative as possible so that we can make government more responsive to the needs of not only the citizens of the state, but the oil and gas industry, and also to CPRA as they're going out to build projects. I think for the oil and gas industry specifically, we want this specifically the Natural Resources Trust Authority to be seen as a signal that we're open for business, and this is not a situation where we're going to hold you hostage. We want to be partners with you moving forward, and in doing so, making sure that those independents have a little bit of certainty when they come to Louisiana and they drill well, that they know that they're going to be covered with regard to any operations as it relates to closing that well. So
Fantastic, what a breath of fresh air.
President Nadu. Thank you. I just want to pile on to Mr. Corville, Mr. Bates, and then even Mr. Cormier. Ms. Cormier mentioned these projects need to be built yesterday. And anytime we have a project that that demonstrates a public need, that project, as far as its permitting goes, should be expedited through the DNR process and all permitting for whatever agency that's to go through. We shouldn't be treated, whether you're building a pump station or a coastal restoration project, the same way as maybe a corporate industrial facility coming into Louisiana. So I just want to pile on. I think that's one of the biggest things. I think where we are, not here just in the state, but in the country, we are literally permitting ourselves out of working, and we are literally permitting ourselves out of existence. And just having successfully built several projects in my parish, the biggest unknown is when will I get my permit? I can know exactly when my engineering is going to be complete. I can maybe have an estimation of time when I'll receive my permit. But I've been waiting years on permits to build pump stations that protect, my residents and their property. So I just want to pile that on. Thanks.
Thank you. And any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
And I would just like to add to President Jules' comment, recovery permits. Permits that slow down recovery really need to be prioritized. That is one of the biggest roadblocks to what OCD disaster recovery does, and it holds up people getting back in their homes.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Yeah, yes, sir, Mr. Davis.
Yeah, one more thing I want to add to that, all great points, well taken. Again, Clay's information is right up there. Tyler is more than happy to meet. I'm more than happy to meet. We want to be as available as possible to anyone who wants to discuss this process. But I also want to add one more thing to provide further encouragement on the drive process. One thing that we're also focusing on is data collection. So understanding that at the federal level, you have national labs where folks can come in and they can use different equipment to determine or figure out ways to do things more creatively or differently. We want to do the same thing when it relates to water management and energy. We've identified some opportunities through looking at this process, that some of those firewalls that were created and the lack of communication between departments, to understand better ways to house data in a centralized location so that it could be distributed to different communities across the state, both North and South Louisiana, to ensure that we have the best information available here, whether it relates to energy development or water resources management, and then also through that water and land office that we're looking to create. Make sure that office is also coordinating with everyone as well to ensure that we have a comprehensive management strategy moving forward with natural resources, because our resources are some of the most precious things that we have in this state, and so ensuring that we have accurate and timely data that can be provided is one of the top priorities of this initiative.
Thank you. And seeing no more questions, Mr. Parker, thank you. Were very informative, open, and thank you for answering the questions in the presentation. Thank you, and of course, the governor's office.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And, also federal update from Neil McMillan. Mr. McMillan? State your name, thank you.
Great. Neil McMillan, Director of Federal Affairs for Department of Energy and Natural Resources. What's going on here? Excellent. For the federal update today, we want to focus on GOMESA revenues, as well as some offshore wind activities, and really some of the advocacy that's been Louisiana-based that we're trying to take nationwide, and then touch on some federal funding opportunities now that we're looking towards fiscal year 2025. Just gonna do this differently. All right, we're going to stay zoomed at 67%. Great, so on March 29th, Interior announced the FY23 GOMESA funding for the whole Gulf was $53 million, and Louisiana received $156 million with $125 for the CPRA state and $31 for the coastal political subdivisions, the 19 parishes that received GOMESA funding. Okay, great. Thought you were changing the mic. And so this is the second year in a row that we have hit the GOMESA cap. And the cap is that we get the first $1 billion in GOMESA eligible revenue, 37.5% is shared with the states. And I guess it doesn't look exactly like we've hit the cap because we see last year and this year is $353 million, but there's a budgetary process that's been in place for about 15 years called sequestration, and that takes about 5.5% of money from us. It's about $21 million for the Gulf states. And so I guess what I want to emphasize is we've hit the high watermark that the legislation allows us to have. This is kind of the top level of funding, even though each year will probably go less and less far as inflation continues. So I guess one of the core tenets we've had in federal legislation is to remove the cap. And in the past, it was like, well, the cap hasn't hit yet. Let's work on some other things as well. But I just want folks to know this is the second year. And as I mentioned in a previous presentation, Interior expects that'll happen every year going forward for the foreseeable future. So we're not getting our full 37.5% because of sequestration, and unfortunately the legislation being pushed can't really deal with that. There's a lot of opposition, and of course everybody wishes sequestration didn't apply. So that'll probably stay the same, but for the benefit of the board and really everybody, I wanted to see like kind of what is our actual percentage we get. And so federal offshore revenue was $7.6 billion this past year, and the vast majority of that's in the Gulf of Mexico. So if you take what we get from GOMESA, we're really at 4.5%. So that shows that there's just so many other ways we should strive to get parity. And I put some numbers at the bottom of like, what if we were an interior state with their 1920 revenue sharing deal? I mean, instead of getting $125 million to the state, 31 to the parishes, we'd probably get $1.7 billion just from this year's activities. And so those are kind of stunning numbers to think what that would do. And so I just really want that to be on people's minds, even though that's so big, we probably can't get all the way there. Surely we take some steady action to get greater parity. Even though the RISE Act or BREEZE Act will get us a long way there, there's even further to go for what we probably in this room think we deserve. And then another revenue opportunity that we've looked at and the RISE Act and BREEZE Act bring into play would be offshore wind leasing. BOA will announce its second offshore lease. You can see in purple, those are the 4 lease sites that will be put up in, I think, September, probably finalized by the end of this year. We'll see if there's more interest there, but they're within the 75 nautical miles of Louisiana, so we would, if certain bills were passed, probably have some participation in that. But if the bills are not passed or passed later, these would not be shareable. So it's another kind of missed opportunity. Even though for their workforce and coast and energy needs, this is great news. So with that kind of context of the funding we should get and the funding we're seeing come that we're not eligible for, that really informs the Shores Coalition, the Sharing Offshore Revenues from Energy Sources Coalition that kind of started in Louisiana and we're branching out. And so we were invited by, as Glenn mentioned, the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association to participate in the fly-in, because there's a lot of synergy in what we would use for coastal money and what that association does on preserving the coast. And the RISE Act, in particular, with its guaranteed funding for offshore wind states, was kind of seen as the main bill of discussion for this conference, and really thought we could kind of spread the word, especially to these wind states that don't have revenue sharing, so that these practitioners would know that there is a proven way to get sustainable federal funds for their projects. And as Glenn mentioned, CPRA is well represented, not just sharing what the legislation could do for the coast, but also showing what a mature coastal program can offer and how versatile it is, which a lot of these states do not have. I have a few slides from that presentation showing what I was trying to communicate to the wind states. One is kind of what types of projects can be done. We're very familiar with what GOMESA can do, and they modeled that for the wind states. There's also a lot of funding to the National Coastal Resilience Fund, which Louisiana is one of the best competitors in, and that's a lot of the habitat side. So really trying to show that a lot of their coastal needs can be met, even if it needs some creativity. And we like to talk about that because the ports and dredging needs keep coming up as a thing we would like to see funded. And what we like to say is there's probably some wiggle room within these eligible uses. So, and then we also just want to show that just in the year since 2017, GOMESA funding, look at all the diversity of projects we've done. Highlighted are kind of the ones that matter to the shores group of coastal, but I think it's really impressive looking at the list of kind of when you combine Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, like what can you do with these dollars, and also like how valuable that is. Like you can see that all these would be kind of federal national priorities. And then the National Coastal Resilience Fund has a lot of synergy there, but also kind of some more specific focuses. And as you can tell, CPRA will be able to take advantage of kind of all these sources. We also want to communicate that there is direct funding to the wind states and to the non-producing states through the National Coastal Resilience Fund block grant, just from activity that would be covered by the RISE Act. And we focus so much on GOMESA, but it's worth pointing out that this will give us $34 million if it was passed today, but you can also see that it brings in every coastal state and territory. It shows them a win, and for us, $34 million is probably a QIPRA project size, but for a lot of these places, this would be even more transformative given their smaller size or less mature coastal programs. And as part of this the conference, we had a flying opportunity. So 12 members of the Shores Coalition, including some new recruits. We did 6 in-person meetings and 1 virtual ones. Just by kind of the way it worked out, they ended up all being with House Republicans. So it was good to kind of get a temperature there. And wanted to kind of share some of the takeaways we had just for food of thought, or kind of show the value of learning from these outreach. One is that there's several different legislative efforts out there, and we kind of saw how efforts were split out. Like one member we met with had their own bill and wasn't even highly aware of the 2 other bills that have more support. So it's tough to see support in concept, but not I guess strength in numbers as much. There's also a big desire for counties or even municipalities to get direct funding like GOMESA. The wind revenue sharing programs have not specified money to counties and parishes, and it was seen as a way to kind of remove some politics and make sure that money's spread out along the state's coast, and that's something that I guess we're used to with GOMESA, but also with the master plan. Other states don't have that, so there's a lot of concern that their part of the coast would not be a winner based off politics. And so I feel like we've done a great example in Louisiana, and we like to communicate all the ways we take a science-forward approach. But other states aren't at that point, and so we need to deal with that. Surprisingly, about half the staff weren't familiar with these major bills, even though they'd be huge beneficiaries. So that's a reminder of the importance of education. And then the other thing was that nobody was arguing that coastal funding was needed or important. And I think that's a real accomplishment and something we can move forward on. And we've seen a few more co-sponsors to the RISE Act, which is good to see. I'll note that Congressman Hoyer is really high up in Democratic leadership, and so that's nice to see, as well as New York is a huge beneficiary, and it's good to see that support get a little more bipartisan there. That was, I'm sorry. That was what we were able to do with just 12 people in 3 hours. We want to take that much broader this June. So the Shores Coalition is organizing a fly-in. It's going to be June 11th and 12th. You can fly in June 11th. We have a welcome reception. Get to know your teammates, your group assignments, and then we do at least 4 to 6 Hill meetings per group, maybe more, depending on turnout. We sent that invite out. We've got about 30 yeses or tentatives, but we've had 71 attendees in the past. It seems like every extra attendee we get another congressional office or 2. So would love to get some more RSVPs, or happy to discuss anybody that manages the coalition. And I guess you get to DC yourself. You find where to stay yourself, and we'll position you up to be a coastal champion. So that's the deal. It's a good deal. And then, so aside from revenue sharing, another major source of funding is the federal appropriations. Now that we have congressionally directed spending or community project funding, we kind of target specific projects. And that's become a really big deal for our Army Corps projects that we're getting through the studies and moving towards construction. So there's kind of 3 buckets of coastal funding opportunities that I'm working with CPRA to pursue. I also encourage you to consider, which is for the Corps. Each federal agency supports the president's budget, but Congress knows that the Corps' budget could always be bigger. They can do more work if tasked for it. So they've been sharing what they can do above the president's budget, and committee's been pretty supportive of that. So we've been pleased to see this year that the North District showing a little more capability than last year. So hopefully we can have even more success through that outreach. The Senate and House provide different NOAA funding opportunities, which are good for the coast. There's even some with Fish and Wildlife Service that we're looking at given our coastal reserves. And lastly, I'll just just show a good field trip we had recently. So we're showing Congressman Clay Higgins' staff of DC kind of what a coastal project is. You know, a lot of the staff in DC are new, but even we had some veterans ones there, and just what coastal restoration really is and how they can be better advocates. So I want to have a big thanks to Scooter with Rockefeller Refuge. Really told the story well, and we hope to do more of that in the spring and summer as these staff get time off. And it's funny enough that as literally the afternoon after that morning visit, we got some good news about this project and started working on them before they even got home. So with that, Chairman Dove, that concludes my presentation.
Okay, any questions?
Thank you.
Oh, yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question, and then you can give me the subliminal microphone, wrap it up. Sweet. It frustrates me that on these fly-ins, and I'm trying to figure out what we can do differently, that we've got a group of 70 folks from Louisiana, and we're actually meeting with members from Alabama, Mississippi, from the Gulf Coast region that benefit from this, and we're trying to convince them to get on board. So are we doing anything differently to maybe get their constituents, not only to buy in and come with us, but do that legwork beforehand and get them involved somehow? And I see on the first slide when you have the breakdown at the very bottom showing the 1.6 billion for Louisiana stuff. If we could break that down even further for some of those counties in those states and show them what they can benefit, I'm assuming they distribute it the same way we do. Maybe that would help our case, but we need to start doing something differently to get those folks involved in this. That's just my opinion. It's very frustrating to go from Louisiana and talking to a member from Mississippi to get them to buy in on this. It's just, I think we need to do something different.
Here, and it definitely is a source of frustration because if your core base isn't unified and all in, how are you going to convince the states that have some benefit but not as strong? So we've spent just unbelievable effort working on Texas, Mississippi, and Alabama, and the results are not where I'd like to see them. And probably some of these more meetings are going to have to cover the same basis because we shouldn't just be we shouldn't even have to go up to like the Huntsville or North Texas area. Like their whole state should be just all in, just like we are in Louisiana. So I'll go through a few things that they're familiar with, but open to more ideas. The National Association of Counties, thanks to your work and President Chasson a lot, has really elevated revenue sharing. We've had meetings on kind of the Gulf Coast level, but they also took it to their national group. It's on their national policy, and met with them in DC on this visiting the SBPA, and we want to try to get their state chapters to sign on so that we can start pointing to other state signatories and be like, look, your state's invested. We've also made some good inroads with Mississippi on some lobbyists basically that represent coastal counties, trying to do and working with the Secretary of State there to get more local buy-in. And Texas is going, we're making more progress in Texas than we have in the past. So it's starting to develop up there, but I agree it is very frustrating and wish we could do a little more there.
Mr. Thornhill.
So thank you, Mr. McMillan. I wanted to, one, commend you and congratulate you guys and our colleagues at Wildlife and Fisheries for their effort with Congressman Higgins' office. To expand a little bit more on what that site visit has evolved in, and then maybe, I know a little bit about it, so I'm cheating here a little bit, but I'd also like to offer my personal help and any assistance that I can provide, and maybe have CPRA consider helping in any way they can to kind of foster that. Could you expand a little bit about what evolved right after that site visit?
Sure. So when we were there, we were talking about there's been 5 miles of shoreline protection constructed, even some as recently as the past 2 weeks. So it was great to see an active site, and see the marsh was protected, but also view, as you see in that photo, the marsh that had just been lost on the latest pushback of the Shell Beach. And fortunately, I think a lot of this is from CPRA's work, there was about 4 miles more of permitted protection that we're waiting for funding to construct. And last year, we weren't able to pursue any federal funding because the Armed Force said they couldn't do any work on the ecosystem side because they were working on the non-structural side. But we got information that the Corps would put up for 2 miles, which is 20 million in work for this fiscal year. And so, I mean, we were hot. So basically, we had a lot of partners there. So we shared that news, developed a appropriations request. We've got 8 or 9 support letters teed up. And so have that submitted to Congressman Higgins, but also to the senators. So I feel like we went from, why is this great project left out when, we're just extending what we've already learned how to do. This should be something the Corps sees as a win to all right, here's 20 million, which would be the biggest we've gotten for that part. So, I wish they did 30 million, but we'll take it and we'll go from there.
Nice work, and Mr. Chairman, or whatever's the appropriate path, but whatever we can do to help foster that along and make sure it doesn't get into the roadblocks that you typically will experience with the Corps, and get that in the hands of CPRA and get that on the ground would be fantastic. So for whatever that's worth, I'll volunteer my time to help in any way I can.
Wonderful.
And with that, you have a question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to something that Neil said. So at the bottom there, can you back to that last slide? So you talk about, comparing the FY23 GOMESA funding to the onshore revenue sharing, which is about 48%, and 2% was taken to go to the Department of Interior. One thing that's also missing there, and I just want to clarify, under not recently now, but a few years ago, the Land and Water Conservation Act was reauthorized in perpetuity and increased to about $1 billion a year. That purchases federal land for national parks. About 47% of federal land owned by the federal government is located in western states. And you also have a lot of land, specifically like the Florida Everglades, which receives funding through the Everglades Restoration Program. They got about $500 million in FY23 appropriations funding. So I think it's important to note that, while you say we're at 4%, that's accurate. But when you compare the fact that a lot of federal land is purchased on the western states and they're receiving roughly $1 billion of offshore revenue generated from our area, roughly 60 or more percent generated from our area, that number is actually significantly higher. And then if you actually go back and compare it to all offshore revenue that has been generated over time, it's a fraction of a percent of what Louisiana is receiving compared to other states through Historic Preservation Fund, Land and Water Conservation Fund, and also through the General Treasury. Oil and gas production in Louisiana pays for programs like Social Security and other things like that, just going into the state, the federal General Treasury. So just one thing I want to add into that as it relates to Chad's comment. When we're going up there and talking to members of Congress and their staff, it's important to note for those western states that we are the ones that pay for your recreation.
Thank you. And last, not least, Mr. Bourgeois.
Okay, so yeah, great presentation, Neil. And I've been in the fly-in several times. For all the reasons that Dustin just brought up, this is really a no-brainer, but that doesn't mean Congress can get it. Okay, I mean it is something that's complicated too, and we see it time to time again that like Mr. Lane said, when we show up, they don't understand the benefits to them, right? So it's something we can focus on, no doubt. But I really get to thinking about GOMESA initially, which when it was first presented in 2006 had the 10-year window before the revenue started kicking in, so that kicked it beyond OMB's mindset, if you will, which meant that the score was minimal. And I think we're kind of getting to the point, it's a no-brainer. We all have this tendency to swing for the fence. And when, GOMESA hit in 2006, everybody went, oh, big whoop, that's 10 years before we get anything. But, we've really been pushing Rise and Breeze for several years now. If we'd have pushed a 10-year window out on that, we would only be a few years before some of these things would have kicked in, and Congress probably wouldn't have paid nearly as much attention to what we're talking about here if it didn't have any score. So I think we're going to have to, take another swing for the fence, I believe, but at some point, I think we've got to come back and say, well, maybe we can segment some components of RISE and our Breeze so that they go beyond a 10-year window so that the score is something we can get across the finish line. So just my thoughts.
Okay, thank you, and, when I move my mic, I'm not trying to rush you, it's just, I need to turn it off, I'm still learning the little system, okay? So
Chairman Doe,
I
that's all good.
apologize for that, I wasn't trying to rush, but look, thank you, very informative, thank you, and, you really cover everything as usual, and, anything else?
No, appreciate the time.
Thank you very much, and, motion to adjourn? Second?
No, public comment. No, public comment.
Public comment. Okay, I'm sorry, public comment. We have a public comment, I guess it's Doug Day.
Sorry to interrupt the motion to adjourn. Mr. Chairman and members, thanks just for the opportunity to take a minute. I'm the coordinator of the Louisiana Hypoxia Working Group, which has met since 2003. And our main purpose is to promote and support the Gulf of Mexico Hypoxia Action Plan. And that's a cooperative effort that Louisiana has been part of since 1998. And, the action plan is being carried out by a task force, 12 states along the Mississippi and Ohio rivers, federal agencies, and the land grant universities in each of those 12 states, and here that's LSU. So we're represented on the task force by the Governor's Office of Coastal Activities, CPRA and DEQ play a supporting role, but I wanted to try to keep attention on the effort as I look forward to working with you all to make improvements on what we're doing. And I wanted to draw attention to the important contributions that a couple of other agencies are making to this effort. The Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, of course, monitors the health of our coastal fisheries and our inland fisheries. That includes the fisheries in and along the Mississippi River. And then, of course, the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry, and in particular, the Office of Soil and Water Conservation, are doing the on-the-ground work with farmers and producers and the conservation districts that Joey mentioned. They're actually the major part of our contribution to this effort. And as Joey also mentioned, they work through the Farm Bill programs. There's a new Farm Bill working through Congress. And they're also spending and implementing funds from the infrastructure bill that passed a couple of years ago. So I wanted to try to keep attention on the issue, and as we move along, with reorganization and assessment, wanted to make sure that that's on your radar screen. It's an area, I think, of tremendous opportunity. And so, anyway, I just wanted to keep it.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I was about 2 minutes. So without that, we have a motion to adjourn. We have a second, Tony Alford. All in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank y'all very much, and thank everyone for